Now, I know there's probably a lot of listeners out there who are like, I would love to do YouTube, but I feel like it requires full time effort. I don't have the time it takes to actually create quality content on YouTube to get noticed. But maybe that is a question for you. How much time does someone actually need to invest each week to see consistent growth and reach, even 100,000 subscribers? I know that you've done it in less time. So what does that look like?
Well, I'll start by saying that it does require an investment of time. I'm not going to tell you you can just film a video in 30 minutes or less, 15 minutes, and post it. And that if you just do that once a week or something, that you will see growth, because you won't. There is a lot of competition on YouTube. So you do have to create quality content if you want to be able to attract subscribers and viewers and grow. But it doesn't take nearly as much time as some people think. I think that sometimes YouTubers, certain YouTubers, talk about it being their full time job or spending dozens of hours on a single video. And that kind of sticks in your mind. And you think, oh, that's what YouTube requires. I don't have nearly that much time. But the fact of the matter is that that's not nearly how much time most YouTubers spend. Most YouTubers spend way less time than that. In my experience, or in my practice, maybe I should say, I spend right about 5 hours total per video that I post. And so that includes both like choosing the topics and planning out the individual video, getting myself ready, like doing my hair and makeup, setting up my camera and all of that, filming the actual video, which sometimes requires a couple of takes. And then I will say it does not involve editing. That time doesn't include editing. That is the one thing that I have chosen to outsource because I found it to be the easiest thing to outsource. And that is something that can take a lot of time. And other people can do it faster than me, right? And then also reviewing the video edit and posting the video, 5 hours. And so lately, I've been doing one video a month, but to see growth, because my channel is already pretty big. It has over 700,000 subscribers. And I'm happy with it just staying that size. I don't need it to grow any bigger than that. So one video a month, that's fine for maintenance, but to grow, you do need to post 1 or 2 videos a week normally. Sometimes you can see growth with just a video every couple of weeks, but it's going to be much more unlikely that you'll see growth. If you have an amazing personality or you're able to make like really riveting videos in one way or another, then you'll see growth even if you post only once a month. But for most of us who are just, regular people with regular personalities and, putting effort into our content, but not an enormous amount of time, one video a week. That's kind of just the I don't want to say the gold standard, but the kind of that like that basic like bar we have to cross to be able to see that growth. So if you're doing that 5 hours a week, that's the kind of the time investment you're looking at. Now, if you're already creating other sorts of content, like you're already writing a blog, if you're already doing a podcast, you can probably add on YouTube in a lot less time than that, because planning the videos does take a fair amount of time. And if you've already written a whole blog post, you can probably sit down and record that video much more quickly and only spend maybe about 3 hours between like the getting ready, the filming, and then the post production stuff. So that's just something to consider.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So starting out, you kind of need YouTube to get to know who you are, what you're posting, get viewers to watch, and the frequency matters in that way. What about content strategy? Are there any strategies when it comes to specific content format or length of the video? What should we be looking at initially as we start the channel?
Yeah, well, definitely there are different formats of videos that do better on YouTube, although it's more varied than it ever has been. It used to be that shorter videos did well when it first started, and then the length got a bit longer, up to 12 and a half minutes. And for years it was 12 and a half minutes. That is the standard. Deviate from that at your risk. But now podcasts have become quite popular on YouTube. And so people are successfully making content that is an hour long, even sometimes even longer. We see Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss with their 3 hour long podcast doing very well. And then also, of course, the shorts on YouTube, they're very quick. And that's kind of training people to like short content as well. So there's a lot more variety, actually. You don't have to stick to a box per se, but I do think it's important to like know your format. Are you going for the long form podcast episode? Are you going for the 10-minute tutorial, or the 10-minute vlog? Or are you going for the 2-minute tutorial or the 30-second short? Because different content is required, like the substance of the content, for those different links or formats. So, for example, if you're going for the long podcast, well, you probably want it to be something that people will be able to turn off their screens and just listen to, and that there will be some dynamic with the audio aspect. So, like a conversation does really well there, right? Because people are only listening. They're not probably staring at their screen for 3 hours while they listen to your podcast. But then on the other hand, if you're making a short video, then you might want to really pack it with some visual elements and make it really visually appealing because you need people to keep their eyes on it for that amount of time. So just two things. One is like know your format. So whatever length of video you are planning to make, look at what videos of that length are doing well on YouTube and like comparable niches or channels and figure out how you can create something in a similar format. Of course, all your own opinions, your own style, everything like that. But follow the format. And then the other thing is it generally works best if you are consistent with the format, specifically the length on your channel. So not a 3-hour video followed by a 10-minute video followed by a 3 hour and back and forth and back and forth. Like you want a channel to be all long interviews or all 10 to 20-minute videos or all shorts. Sometimes people get away with mixing shorts with some other format. YouTube has tried to fix that problem because originally it really confused the algorithm, and the algorithm just could not figure out whether people liked your long videos or your short videos. So they've done a lot of work to make it more separate in the algorithm's eyes so that now it doesn't damage your channel to post both of those formats, because those things like YouTube actually treats differently. You know, YouTube's putting them in different places so they can do that. But other than that, like with your long form videos, whether that's 5 minutes or 3 hours, you want to have a more consistent length.
Okay. That's good to know. I would not have thought about that where you couldn't have like shorter videos and then those longer interviews. So kind of sticking to one or the other makes
Yeah,
the
and I don't
most
want to give you
sense.
the wrong impression. It's less because of quote the algorithm and more actually because of your viewers, like as
Mm,
humans. If they've come to your channel because they like your 5 minute tutorials, then they're probably not going to be like the sort of person who is interested in a 3 hour interview, or at least they're less likely to be interested in that. So you just kind of have to give them what you advertised. You know, if a store is advertising fruit and you walk in and they're selling clothes, I mean, you might be happy to buy clothes, but you're going to be in the wrong mindset and like not trust them to provide quality clothes and things like that. So if you advertise with one sort of video, you need to keep providing that same sort of video.
gotcha. That makes sense. It's kind of similar to topic then, like niching in the beginning, like don't talk about health and fitness if you are a veterinarian. I don't know. Like, does that make
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, you do want to talk about something that people will know to trust you for. So, yeah, if you are such and such, if you are a veterinarian, you want to talk about veterinary medicine, for example. Now, that's not, of course, to say that you can't talk about just whatever you're interested in. That's fine. But you do need to like foster trust around that area, show your expertise or your interest in that area, and then be consistent with it. Because if they come to your channel to learn about health and fitness, and then one day you start talking about veterinary medicine, you're gonna lose a whole lot of viewers. They might not actually unsubscribe, but they certainly won't click on that video, and the algorithm is going to basically think that people hate you now.
got it? That makes sense. So let's say a creator only has a few hours a week. Where should they really focus their efforts? Should it be on content creation, on SEO, on thumbnails, on engagement? What's the best use of their time?
So I would absolutely prioritize, first of all, some work that is going to carry through the rest of your videos. So what I mean by that is like setting up a nice background for your videos, figuring out your lighting. It's okay if you spend a few weeks only kind of doing that setup type of work and you don't actually film any content. That is going to help your channel do way better long term than if you just jump into filming right away. At the same time, I don't want to quash people's enthusiasm. You know, if you're excited to just jump into filming, feel free to do that, because it's good to run with that motivation. But I do want to encourage you to invest that time into getting things looking really nice, and specifically background and lighting. Those are going to be your two biggest things. Beyond that, once you've got kind of that foundation laid, then you're probably going to want to put the majority of your time actually into planning your individual videos. Now, that does not mean that you need to script every single word, but make sure that you have something of substance to say, or that you make your video really interesting or entertaining or funny, whatever it is, the angle that you're going for. Maybe you want it to be a really helpful tutorial, but plan it out so that it will have structure and it will be either really entertaining or really helpful. The actual filming, it doesn't generally make a lot of sense to put a bunch of extra time into that unless you want to film like a lot of b-roll or extra shots, which you could do to make your like if you're going for very beautiful videos, sort of like aesthetic, lifestyle sort of videos, that might be where you want to put the time. But figure out what you're focusing on. Again, like, is it supposed to be entertaining? Is it supposed to be helpful? Is it supposed to be more like aesthetic, something like that? And then where I'd save time is again on that editing. You don't need to do that. Anybody can do it, and it can save you a ton of time to have somebody else do it.
So I actually do want to go back and talk about something you shared a little bit more in the beginning, where you talked about, recording your podcast and then also recording a YouTube video after it while it's fresh in your mind and you've had it created. So I know for a lot of us, we all have full schedules. So making the most use of the content is really valuable. So what would you say are your best tips for batch producing content and or repurposing that content on either like a blog or a podcast?
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts. I don't think we have time for all of them because we could do, I'm sure, a multi-hour class on my current like repurposing strategies and methods because it's come a long way. Just for a tiny bit of context, people have been talking about repurposing for, ever since people have been creating content, probably. And it used to be that the idea was like, so if you just record a video, then you have audio and you have the content itself. And obviously, you have like the visual. So you can take that video and you can rip the audio and publish it as a podcast. And you can publish the transcript as a blog. And you can take snippets out of it and publish them on social media. And I tried that method and it was just a complete failure because a transcript does not read like a blog post. And even between a YouTube video and a podcast, a lot of the time we talk differently. Sometimes you want to use a different sort of microphone, for example. You might also, this is probably the main difference, is you might want your podcast to be a lot longer than your YouTube video. And also some things just don't translate. Like if I'm doing a software tutorial, how to schedule something on a certain software, that's not going to translate over to a podcast. They need to see what I'm doing, right? So for a while, I just completely abandoned repurposing and there were phases where I tried to do all the things and phases where I was just like, nope, I'm just going to do YouTube because I can't do all the things right now. But I didn't ever try to like just repurpose in the same way. But things have come a long way, and I've actually found AI to be really helpful these days but also just figured out some better systems. So, one of the things that I figured out is that you can often repurpose your planning work. Like I was talking about before, you plan out the whole blog post, you write the whole blog post, and then you are like very prepared to sit down and record that video. So you can do so without having to do any more planning, but also with a lot less like stutters and stops and restarts because you know this content backwards and forwards. So that's not like directly repurposing, the outward facing content, but repurposing kind of that internal content or that prep work, I think is one of the most effective ways to repurpose. So what I'll do sometimes is I'll write out a blog post and, of course, have done the planning for that. And then I will record it as a podcast. And the reason I do the podcast first is because it's okay for the podcast to be longer and maybe even a little bit more like rambly or chatty because people like they're there for the conversation, they're listening. It's okay if it is longer form. For the YouTube video, though, I need to keep people's attention. We need to be focused. We need to be on point, right? So I'll record that afterwards and I'll have figured out how to be a lot more succinct and it just comes naturally to be a lot more succinct. I've kind of gotten all my like extra thoughts out of the way and I'm a lot more organized. I figured out how I want to say things. So I'll record the YouTube video last. So that's one strategy that I like to use. But the other strategy that utilizes AI, sometimes I'll still start with the podcast and then do the YouTube video. Of course, sometimes you can just rip the video audio for the podcast, right? Sometimes it translates fine, especially if you're fine with your YouTube video and your podcast being the same length. For me, I don't generally do that because I do want them to be different lengths. I try to go for 10 to 15 minutes for my videos, but for the podcast, I want them to be 30 minutes or sometimes even a bit longer. And I just find that after recording that 30-plus minute podcast, it's so easy for me to record a 15-minute YouTube video. Like, there's no reason not to, especially since I had to put on my makeup to do the YouTube video either way, and turn on the lights and everything. So it's not really anything extra that I wouldn't already be doing for the YouTube video. Anyway, AI. So, as you may know, you can configure these custom GPTs. Okay, so it's where you take Chat GPT and you can create like a project in it and and talk to it and give it like a specific prompt and some examples and things like that. And then in the future, you can just pop in this case, a video transcript into it, and it will turn it into a blog post. And when I say turn it into a blog post, I mean completely rewrite the entire thing while keeping all of your structure that you had to it and your ideas. And that's the most important part because I want a blog post that has my original ideas, or at least, maybe they're not original ideas, but the way I was thinking about things, and the way I wanted to present it. But like I said, a transcript is so different from a blog post. You can't just clean up a transcript. So I have been having so much success with giving ChatGPT that transcript and having it turn it into a blog post. So much better than if you've ever tried to have ChatGPT write you a blog post from scratch or from an outline, and it just came out sounding so canned and artificial and fake and generic, and you hate it. Well, this really solves that problem because it is starting with some source material and, like I said, your original thoughts and ideas. So it ends up sounding great and it sounds like me, and it saves so much time. So now what I've generally been doing is recording a podcast and or a video, depending on how, like, what the piece of content is and how I want to use it. Then I get it transcribed, and you could do that with Descript or whatever transcription tool you like to use. There's so many great, even free ones out there these days, and feed that into my custom GPT. And then I have a blog post and I do a tiny bit of editing on it, or I hand it over to somebody on my team to do some editing. And then we publish it on the blog. And then also, now that ChatGPT has that information, it is so much better at pulling out something for social media or writing an email to promote that video than it used to be, where we would try to like just find a paragraph that works or something like that. That did not work well at all, but it can kind of rewrite things and make them much more suited for social media. And like I said, also, I have a custom GPT that can take a transcript and write a promo email to send out to my email list to tell them about my latest video or my latest podcast episode or whatever it is. And that works really well. And it definitely saves me some creative energy.
Hmm, I love that. I love repurposing with Chat GPT if you know how to do it right. Like you were talking about doing those actual prompts and not just throwing it in there and hoping you get something good.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious, what would you say for a new creator? Should they try to repurpose in a few different places right away, or should they
Mm.
focus on the one thing first and do it really well?
Oh, I would definitely focus on the one thing first, and get to the point where you are really happy with the content that you're creating. Like if it is YouTube videos, like to where you're making a YouTube every week that you are happy with. And kind of what I mean by that, or how to get there, is that every time you make a video, you want to look at it with a critical eye. I would recommend editing your videos yourself at first for the opportunity to do that, because you can really see what you would like to change, whether that's how you're structuring the content or how long you're talking about different things or the lighting or the way you're framing up the shots, whatever it is. If you hand it over to somebody else to edit it, you can see the footage beforehand, of course, and you can see what they hand you, but you can't really see why it came out the way that it came out. And so you might just feel like, you need a different editor. They're not doing a good enough job. But when you actually get your hands on it yourself, then you are able to understand the challenges and think of ways to solve those challenges and make your videos a whole lot better. So I would start there, and just with every video you create, not only be hands on with it, but be constantly asking yourself, like, what could I do to make this better? How could this be even better? What's one thing I could change to make this better? Those sorts of questions. And in just a few months, you will find that your videos are dramatically better. And you probably won't still, or maybe I should say, you probably still won't be 100% satisfied with them. I've been making YouTube videos for something like 7 years now, 6 or 7 years, and I've made a few hundred YouTube videos, and I'm still not totally satisfied with them. It depends on the video. Some of them I'm happier with than others, but there's always room for improvement. So don't wait till you have it perfect, but do spend, I would say, a few months working on just one type of content before you try to add in or layer in or repurpose any sort of thing.
Yeah, love it. I don't think we're ever satisfied with the things we create. We always think we could do better. It's like my kids, whenever they're competing and they do really well, they're like, oh, I could have done better, right? We're just never, it's human nature. So we're talking marketing and marketing off social media. We already talked about how YouTube isn't really social just because it's evergreen and it's out there as a long form content. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I know that you believe that YouTube is king when it comes to long form content. So maybe just convince us that it is the best way to get visibility.
I'll start by saying that I certainly wouldn't die on the hill that YouTube is not social media. I don't know if I'd even argue that it's not social media. I would just say it's different from other social media and it has some unique advantages and works way better in
Yeah,
a lot of
totally.
ways. So why I would say YouTube is king when it comes to content creation. First of all, you've got the audio visual aspect of it, right? You are able to connect with your viewers in a much deeper way than you are with written content or even with a podcast, especially compared to written content or social media. You get this much deeper connection when you are looking them in the eye and talking to them. Podcast, I think, also creates a really good deep connection because there is something special about having someone whisper sweet nothings into your ear, if you know what I mean. And not having a face with the podcast actually can lend you some extra like credibility and authority that when they see you on a YouTube video and they see your humanity, then you're just a regular person. But when they hear you in a podcast, people often give like just an extra amount of credibility or authority to you. So there's something special about a podcast. But there's also something special about YouTube. Like there's just kind of apples and oranges, I think, like similar and both great, but different. But then where I think YouTube really pulls ahead and why I choose to focus on it. Like I've got a podcast too, and I love my podcast, but I focus on YouTube because of the search algorithm on YouTube. YouTube is it's a great platform for people to discover content on whether they're looking for it or not. So there's both search and suggested on YouTube. So sometimes people go to YouTube and they search, how to use acuity scheduling or something like that, right? And they might find your tutorial. But sometimes they're just browsing, they're just looking for some entertainment, and YouTube will suggest your video to them if they're the sort of person who might be interested in your sort of content. So basically, YouTube has spent millions and millions of dollars building this incredible algorithm that is designed to match viewers with videos they want to watch. So if you make videos that somebody out there wants to watch, then YouTube is going to do that like heavy lifting for you. It's going to do what we pay Meta ads or Google ads to do for us sometimes, or you pay to sponsor a podcast maybe. You're trying to get out there and find those viewers and show them your content, to get them to pay attention to you, get them to find out that you exist. But YouTube does that for you. And the icing on the cake is they pay you when they do that. Okay. Instead of you paying them, they pay you because you earn ad revenue on those videos that you create. And if you get to the point where you are getting thousands of views on your videos every month, which isn't that hard, then you'll find that you will be earning generally hundreds, if not thousands of dollars from ad revenue. It's actually a lot more than a lot of people realize. With my channel, even after I got my first paycheck from YouTube about 3 months after I started my channel, and it was just for like $113. But then the next one was a little bigger. The next one was a little bigger. By month like 6 or 7, the check was over $1,000. So it did not take that long at all. Um, and so I that my point here is that money can add up and it can turn into a full-time living even on part-time hours pretty quickly. But I've said it before and I will say it again. I would happily make YouTube videos if they paid me nothing because it is so worth it to me to have that opportunity to reach potential customers and grow my audience and establish my credibility and all those different like benefits that I get from YouTube that I think it's great that they pay me. I love it, like I said, icing on the cake, but there's so many other reasons beyond that.
I love it that you have something that you would do for free that you get paid to do. It's super
I
cool.
know. Yeah, it is.
Every time I have you, I talk with you about YouTube and why YouTube, you convince me just a little bit more to get back on. So we'll see if I ever do. Um,
I know
but
you're a busy lady, and finding even 4 or 5 hours a week, for something can be really tough when you have a full time, I'll say job, and I don't mean specifically for you, but when somebody has a full time job, like that is a really tough thing to do. And so I think that the most important thing to think about isn't like how can I make time for this or how can I fit this in. It's what could I trade off with this? What could YouTube replace? And the answer might be like nothing. Maybe there isn't something that you want to replace with YouTube. But if you're doing social media right now, maybe you could take the 5 hours that you're spending on Twitter and Instagram or whatever it is. If you're on at least two platforms and you're being consistent with them, you're probably spending at least 5 hours a week on them. Even one platform, you can pretty easily spend 5 hours a week on. Well, if you replace that with YouTube, think about how you might be able to get better results. You might be able to reach more people. You might be able to reach people more deeply. You might be able to generate more leads because YouTube viewers convert into leads at way higher rates than, say, Instagram scrollers. And maybe you could earn revenue with. And social media is not the only thing you could trade off. Maybe you could trade off blogging or podcasting. Maybe you could trade off networking, for example. That was one of the things I traded off when I started doing YouTube. Or maybe I shouldn't say when I started, but when I decided to really go all in with YouTube, I decided to abandon networking for quite a while. Like a few years. I didn't do any networking at all because I was able to reach so many more people by creating a YouTube video than by talking to one person at a time in a Facebook group or something like that.
Makes so much sense. And we're talking all about making social media optional or small. And so taking time from something like that and investing it in something else that's going to grow dividends over the years makes a lot of sense. One last question that I do have is about the monetization factor. Obviously, once you hit a certain amount of subscribers and views, you can monetize directly on the platform, which is also appealing for YouTube. But what are some other like strategic ways that we can monetize with minimal time? Do you have any tips for that?
If you're looking to monetize your YouTube with minimal time, um, I know that most of the people who will be listening to this are business owners. So I would just think about like how can you just layer it into your current marketing funnel or customer journey? And maybe I shouldn't even say layer it in, but like I was talking about before, swap it out. What can you swap it out? There's all sorts of other ways you can monetize, of course, like ad revenue or memberships or selling merch or all sorts of things. Most of them require a moderate amount of extra time and can be difficult to get to a point where they're like very financially significant. So I would recommend that you ignore all the other ways you can monetize your YouTube channel and just focus on monetizing it with your existing business or your existing service that you offer or whatever it is. And then the only other thing other than that, just as you have time, work on the ad revenue side, although that requires very little additional effort at all, if any. You can do it by just when you get to the thresholds, which are generally 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours. You click a few buttons, it turns it on, and then you just get passive income from your videos. So that's probably the most minimal and easiest way to get monetized.
Awesome. Any final encouragement or tips for those who are on the fence about jumping into YouTube?
Well, I would say that you should give it a try if you're considering it, because it's one of those things where you look back and you always wish that you started a year ago. If it's something that you've been thinking about, like if you had started a year ago, then think of where you could be now, sort of a thing. So if it's something that you are waffling on and you're having a hard time deciding should I do this or not, just commit to giving it a try. It doesn't have to be a lifetime commitment, certainly. but give it a fair try. Set aside some time for the next 3 months to make a video each and every single week and just see where you get in 3 months. And I don't just mean like how many subscribers you can get or how many views you can get, but see how much you like it and how much time it ends up taking you and whether it's worth it, what sort of results you get, and also the views and the subscribers. Are you able to get monetized in that time period? Or are you getting close, right? But I just don't I think a lot of people regret not starting sooner. And I also think from personal experience that it can be like a big decision. And so that can make it tough because like obviously there's like pros and cons with, the time commitment and whatnot. And so you can just go back and forth for years. But it's better to just try it and find out.